In the heart of Turin, Italy, lies a mystery that has captivated believers and skeptics alike for centuries. A simple piece of linen, bearing the faint image of a crucified man, has become the center of intense debate and scientific scrutiny. Is it the authentic burial cloth of Jesus Christ, or an elaborate medieval forgery? Tonight, we delve into the enigma of the Shroud of Turin, exploring the evidence, the controversies, and the theories that surround this ancient artifact. Join us as we unravel one of history's most enduring mysteries. Number 1. The controversy surrounding the Shroud. The Shroud of Turin has been a source of debate for centuries. This piece of linen cloth bears the image of a man who appears to have been crucified, leading many to believe it's the burial shroud of Jesus Christ. However, others argue it's a medieval forgery. The controversy extends beyond religious circles, drawing in scientists, historians, and even governments. The debate intensified in the late 20th century when scientific methods were applied to study the shroud. These studies have produced conflicting results, further fueling the controversy. Some researchers claim to have found evidence supporting the shroud's authenticity, while others point to tests suggesting it's much younger than it would need to be to have wrapped Jesus' body. The shroud has also brought up theories about its origin and the formation of the image. These range from supernatural explanations to complex scientific hypotheses. The ongoing controversy surrounding the Shroud of Turin highlights the intersection of faith, science, and history, making it a subject of enduring fascination for many. Number 2. Physical description of the shroud. The Shroud of Turin is a linen cloth measuring approximately 14 feet 5 inches long and 3 feet 7 inches wide. It has been kept in Turin, Italy, since 1578 in the Royal Chapel of the Cathedral of San Giovanni Battista. The cloth bears a faint, brownish image of a front and back view of a naked man with his hands folded across his groin. The man appears to be about 5 feet 7 inches tall and has a beard, mustache, and shoulder-length hair. The image is much clearer when viewed as a photographic negative, a property that wasn't discovered until 1898, when it was first photographed. The cloth shows evidence of damage from a fire in 1532, and there are patches and water stains from efforts to extinguish that fire. The image itself is not made up of any pigments or dyes, but is a result of the linen fibers themselves being discolored. The shroud also bears what appear to be bloodstains, corresponding to the wounds of crucifixion as described in the Bible, including marks on the wrists, feet, and side. Number 3. The mysterious image on the cloth. Unlike a typical painting or stain, the image on the shroud is extremely superficial, affecting only the topmost fibers of the linen cloth. The coloration that forms the image is the result of oxidation, dehydration, and conjugation of the polysaccharide structure of the microfibrils of the linen itself. One of the most striking features of the image is its negativity. When photographed and viewed as a negative, the image appears much clearer and more lifelike. This property was discovered in 1898 by Secondo Pia, an Italian amateur photographer, when he took the first photographs of the shroud. Another unusual characteristic is the image's three-dimensional information. When the image is processed using VP8 image analyzer, which assigns darker areas to be closer to the viewer, it produces a realistic 3D figure. This property is not found in normal photographs or paintings. Despite numerous studies, scientists have been unable to explain how the image was formed or replicated with medieval technologies. This continues to be one of the main points of debate regarding the shroud's authenticity. Number 4. The Catholic Church's stance. The Catholic Church's position on the Shroud of Turin is one of careful neutrality. While the Church has allowed scientific testing on the shroud and promotes it as a powerful symbol of Christ's suffering, it stops short of declaring the shroud as an authentic relic of Jesus. The Church refers to the shroud as an icon rather than a relic. This distinction is important because it emphasizes the shroud's role in inspiring faith rather than its historical authenticity. Pope John Paul II called it a mirror of the gospel and a distinguished relic, but did not claim it was genuine. The Vatican has supported research on the shroud, allowing multiple scientific examinations. Yet, it maintains that the deeper significance of the shroud lies in its ability to help people contemplate the suffering of Jesus, regardless of its historical origins. This stance allows the Church to respect both the devotion of those who believe in the shroud's authenticity and the skepticism of those who doubt it. It also leaves room for ongoing scientific investigation without tying Church doctrine to any particular outcome of that research. Number 5. Early scientific investigations. Scientific interest in the Shroud of Turin began in earnest in the late 19th century. The first major breakthrough came in 1898 when Secondo Pia took the first photographs of the shroud. When he developed the negatives, he was startled to see that they showed a much clearer positive image of a man's face and body. This discovery sparked a new wave of interest and research. In 1931, Giuseppe Enri took new photographs of the shroud, confirming Pia's findings and providing clearer images for study. These photographs allowed researchers to examine the shroud in detail without needing access to the cloth itself. In 1969, a commission appointed by the Church examined the shroud visually, historically, and with various scientific tests. They concluded that the image was not painted and that the blood stains consisted of real blood, but they made no pronouncements about authenticity. In 1973, Max Frey, a Swiss criminologist, took sticky tape samples from the shroud and claimed to have found pollen grains from plants native to Palestine. While controversial, this study opened up new avenues for investigating the shroud's possible origins and history. Number 6. The 1988 carbon dating test. In 1988, the Vatican allowed small samples of the shroud to be taken for radiocarbon dating. This test was seen as a potential definitive answer to the question of the shroud's age. 3 reputable laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona were chosen to conduct independent tests using the carbon-14 dating method. The results, published in the journal Nature in 1989, stated that the linen of the shroud dated to between 1260 and 1390 AD with 95% confidence. This placed the origin of the cloth in the Middle Ages, centuries after the time of Jesus. These results were met with mixed reactions. Many saw it as conclusive proof that the shroud was a medieval forgery. However, supporters of the shroud's authenticity raised questions about the testing process and the possibility of contamination affecting the results. The carbon dating results remain one of the strongest arguments against the shroud's authenticity. Subsequent studies have challenged these findings, arguing that the sample used for dating may not have been representative of the whole cloth. This controversy continues to be a central part of the shroud debate. Number 7. Barry Schwartz's initial doubts. Barry Schwarz was the official documenting photographer for the Shroud of Turin research project, STURP, in 1978. As a Jewish man, he initially approached the project with skepticism, fully expecting to prove that the shroud was a painted forgery. But Schwartz's experiences during the intensive 5-day examination of the shroud led him to question his initial assumptions. He observed that the image on the shroud had properties that were difficult to explain. There was no evidence of pigments or brush strokes that would indicate it was a painting. One of the most striking observations for Schwarz was the 3-dimensional quality of the image when processed through certain imaging equipment. This property is not found in normal paintings or photographs. Over time, Schwarz became convinced that the shroud was not a forgery, though he remains cautious about claiming it's definitively the burial cloth of Jesus. His journey from skeptic to advocate has made him a prominent voice in shroud research. Schwarz now runs the Shroud of Turin website and lectures on his experiences, emphasizing the need for ongoing scientific research into this enigmatic object. Number 8. The 3D analysis of the image. The 3-dimensional information encoded in the image was discovered in 1976 when Air Force scientists John Jackson and Eric Jumper analyzed a photograph of the shroud using a VP8 image analyzer. This device, typically used for creating relief maps from aerial photographs, assigns different levels of vertical relief to different shades of light and dark. When applied to a normal photograph, it produces a distorted, unrecognizable image. When used on the shroud image, it produced a remarkably coherent, three-dimensional figure. This suggests that the intensity of the image on the shroud is directly related to the distance between the body and the cloth at each point. In other words, parts of the body that would have been closer to the cloth, like the nose, appear darker, while more distant parts, like the sides of the face, appear lighter. This 3D property is not found in paintings or normal photographs. It has led some researchers to hypothesize that the image was formed by some sort of radiation emitted by the body, with intensity decreasing with distance. Number 9. Delayed release of raw data. The carbon dating tests conducted in 1988 were surrounded by controversy, not just because of their results, but also due to the unusual secrecy that followed. The raw data from these tests, which would typically be made available for peer review and further analysis, was not released to the public for 29 years. This delay in releasing the data raised suspicions among many shrewd researchers. They argued that withholding such crucial information was against standard scientific practice and hindered further research and verification of the results. It wasn't until 2017 that the raw data was finally made public, following a Freedom of Information request to the British Museum, which had supervised the testing process. The long delay in releasing this information fueled speculation about potential issues with the testing process or results. When the data was finally released, it allowed researchers to conduct their own analyses. Some claimed to have found inconsistencies in the data, while others defended the original conclusions. The delayed release of this data remains a contentious point in the Shroud's scientific history, highlighting the challenges of conducting research on such a controversial object. Number 10. Issues with the carbon dating sample. After the raw data from the 1988 carbon dating was finally released, several issues with the testing process came to light. One of the main concerns was the location from which the sample was taken. The sample used for dating was taken from a corner of the shroud. This corner showed signs of repair and reweaving, possibly done in medieval times. This raised the possibility that the sample was not representative of the entire cloth. Furthermore, the sample was divided among the 3 laboratories, but there were no control samples taken from other parts of the shroud for comparison. This is not standard practice in carbon dating, where multiple samples are usually tested to ensure accuracy. Another issue was the homogeneity of the sample. Analysis of the raw data suggested that the sample was not uniform, with different parts yielding different date ranges. This heterogeneity could indicate that the sample included both original and repaired sections of the cloth. Number 11. Allegations of financial incentives. Some claims suggested that certain parties had a vested interest in proving the shroud was not authentic. Reports surfaced that the British Museum, particularly the Oxford laboratory involved in the carbon dating tests, had received a substantial sum of money from anonymous donors. The alleged purpose of this funding was to disprove the authenticity of the shroud. These allegations raised questions about the objectivity of the research and the potential influence of outside interests on scientific processes. Critics argued that such financial incentives could have biased the testing procedures or the interpretation of results. It's important to note that these allegations remain unproven. The institutions involved have denied any improper influence on their research. Nonetheless, the mere existence of these claims has added another layer of complexity to the shroud debate. Number 12. Blood chemistry analysis. The apparent bloodstains on the Shroud of Turin have been a subject of intense scientific scrutiny. Researchers have conducted various tests to determine if these stains are indeed blood, and if so, what they can tell us about the shroud's history. Initial tests in the 1970s and 1980s confirmed the presence of blood components, including hemoglobin, albumin, and immunoglobulin. The blood type was identified as AB, which is relatively rare in the general population, but more common among Middle Eastern populations. One intriguing aspect of the bloodstains is their reddish color, which is unusual for old blood. Some researchers suggest this could be due to high levels of bilirubin, possibly resulting from severe physical trauma before death. The pattern of the bloodstains has also been studied. Researchers note that they correspond accurately to crucifixion wounds, including details that would not have been known to medieval artists. Another significant finding is that the bloodstains were present on the cloth before the image was formed. This suggests that whatever process created the image did not disturb the existing bloodstains. While these findings are compelling to some, skeptics argue that the blood could have been added later to create a convincing relic. Number 13. Pollen and dirt evidence. The Shroud of Turin has been found to contain traces of pollen and dirt that have provided intriguing clues about its possible history and origins. This evidence has been used by some researchers to support claims of the shroud's authenticity. In the 1970s, Swiss criminologist Max Frey collected pollen samples from the shroud using tape strips. He identified 58 different types of pollen grains, many of which were from plants native to the Middle East. Some were specific to the area around Jerusalem. Later studies have both supported and challenged Frey's findings. A 1999 study identified pollen from plants that grow only in the region of Turkey and the Middle East, including one that is unique to halophytes around the Dead Sea. Dirt particles found on the shroud have also been analyzed. Researchers have claimed to find traces of limestone chemically similar to that found in ancient Jerusalem tombs. These findings are not without controversy. Critics argue that the pollen and dirt could have been transferred to the shroud during its known history in Europe, or even deliberately added to create a false impression of Middle Eastern origin. Number 14. Wide-angle X-ray scattering results. In recent years, researchers have employed advanced scientific techniques to study the Shroud of Turin, including wide-angle X-ray scattering, WAX. This method allows scientists to analyze the structure of materials at the molecular level. A study using WAX was conducted on small samples of the shroud, comparing them to other ancient textiles. The results suggested that the linen fibers of the shroud were significantly more degraded than other medieval fabrics, indicating that it could be much older than the radiocarbon dating had suggested. The researchers found that the crystallinity of the cellulose in the shroud's linen was similar to that of much older textiles, including some dating back to 3000 BC. This level of degradation would be consistent with a cloth that is nearly 2,000 years old. It's important to note that factors other than age can affect the degradation of linen, including environmental conditions and any treatments the cloth may have undergone. While these results don't definitively prove the shroud's age, they have reignited debate about the accuracy of the 1988 carbon dating. Number 15. Ancient coins in the image. The theory about images of ancient coins over the eyes of the man in the shroud was first proposed in 1979 by Jesuit priest Francis L. Filas. Filas claimed to have identified the image of a small coin minted during the reign of Pontius Pilate between 29 and 32 AD. He argued that he could see letters and a design that matched coins from this period. Subsequent researchers have expanded on this claim, suggesting that they can see images of two different coins, one over each eye. They argue that this practice of placing coins over the eyes of the dead was a known Jewish burial custom of the time. If true, this would be strong evidence for the shroud's authenticity, as it would be highly unlikely for a medieval forger to know about and accurately depict such specific, historically accurate details. Although many experts remain skeptical of these claims, they argue that the alleged coin images are the result of pareidolia, the tendency to see patterns in random data. Number 16. Historical measurement and stitching details. The Shroud of Turin has been studied not only for its image and possible age, but also for its physical construction. These details have provided interesting insights into the cloth's possible origin and history. The dimensions of the shroud closely match ancient measurements. It measures approximately 8 by 2 cubits, a unit commonly used in the ancient Near East. This correspondence to ancient measurements has been seen by some as evidence of the shroud's antiquity. Another intriguing feature is a strip of cloth about 3 inches wide, sewn onto one long edge of the shroud. The stitching used to attach this strip is known as the invisible reweave seam. Some textile experts have claimed that this particular type of stitching was a specialty of weavers in 1st century Jerusalem. The weave of the main cloth is also noteworthy. It's a 3-to-1 herringbone twill weave, which is relatively unusual. While this type of weave was known in the ancient world, it's not commonly found in medieval European textiles. These details of measurement and construction have been used to argue for the shroud's authenticity. Number 17. Anatomical Accuracy of Crucifixion Depiction. The anatomical accuracy of the shroud's depiction of crucifixion extends to details that were not widely known in medieval times, when the shroud is alleged by some to have been created. The image shows nail wounds in the wrists rather than the palms, while artistic depictions traditionally showed nails through the palms. Modern studies have shown that nails through the wrists would be necessary to support the body's weight during crucifixion. The posture of the body is also consistent with crucifixion. The image shows the shoulders in a pulled-up position, the chest expanded, and the knees slightly bent. This aligns with what we now understand about the mechanics of death by crucifixion. The wound in the side of the body is also anatomically correct. It shows a flow of both blood and clear fluid, consistent with post-mortem wounds where blood separates into clot and serum. These accurate details have led some researchers to argue that the image must have been created from an actual crucified body. Number 18. Hidden inscriptions on the shroud. Some researchers claim to have discovered hidden inscriptions on the Shroud of Turin, invisible to the naked eye but detectable through various imaging techniques. In 1979, researchers claimed to have found Greek and Latin letters near the face on the shroud. They interpreted these as spelling out Inacem, to death, and Nazarenen vs. Nazarene. Later, in 2009, Barbara Frail, a paleographer at the Vatican's secret archives, announced that she had discovered more extensive writing on the shroud. She claimed to have found inscriptions in Greek, Latin, and Aramaic, including the phrase Jesus Nazarene in Greek. Frailer argued that these inscriptions were consistent with a death certificate that would have been placed on the body of a crucified person in Roman times. She suggested that the text had been transferred to the cloth from such a document. These claims are highly controversial. Many experts in imaging and ancient languages have disputed the existence of these inscriptions, arguing that they are the result of over-interpretation of random patterns on the cloth. Number 19. Theories on image formation. Over the years, numerous theories have been proposed about the formation of the image, ranging from natural processes to divine intervention. One early theory suggested that the image was formed by direct contact between the body and the cloth, possibly through a reaction with sweat or burial spices. This doesn't explain the image's unusual properties, such as its three-dimensionality. Another hypothesis proposes that the image was created by a burst of radiation from the body. This could potentially explain the superficial nature of the image and its three-dimensional characteristics. Some researchers have even suggested that this radiation could have been released during a miraculous event like the resurrection. Other theories include the possibility of a natural chemical reaction between the cloth and gases produced by a decomposing body, or the use of a hot statue or bas relief to scorch the image onto the cloth. More recent hypotheses have involved complex processes like coronal discharge or ultraviolet radiation, but no theory has yet been able to fully explain all the unique characteristics of the image or to reproduce it exactly. Number 20. The vacuum UV radiation hypothesis. The theory that the image on the Shroud of Turin involves vacuum ultraviolet radiation was proposed by Dr. Paolo Di Lazzaro and his team at Italy's National Agency for New Technologies, energy, and sustainable economic development. The researchers used excimer lasers to produce short bursts of ultraviolet light, which they directed at linen cloth. They found that this process could create a coloration on the outermost fibers of the linen that was similar to that seen on the shroud. This theory potentially explains several unique characteristics of the shroud image. It accounts for the superficiality of the image, as the radiation would only affect the very top layer of fibers. It also could explain the three-dimensional information in the image, as the intensity of coloration could be related to the distance between the body and the cloth. The researchers did note that the power required to create an image the size of the shroud would be enormous, several billion watts of VUV radiation. This has led some to argue that if this theory is correct, the image formation would have required a supernatural event. While this hypothesis has generated significant interest, it remains controversial. Critics argue that it doesn't fully explain all aspects of the image and that the conditions required are implausible in a 1st century tomb setting. Do you think the shroud is real or a fake? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.